apartment. So last night I was hanging out, sitting on the couch, watching some Netflix, might have involved some tigers, and I got hit with the strongest sweet tooth. But this time, I was out of luck. I didn't have anything to eat. So I got a little creative and I came up with something that was so delicious that I am so excited to share it with all of you. This is a recipe for my brown butter pantry cookies. I call them pantry cookies because you can literally throw anything you have in your pantry in this cookie. What's also really cool about this cookie is that it doesn't use any flour at all. All right, enough talking, let's get cooking. All right, here we are back in my kitchen. Now, like I said, this is a totally customizable cookie. That's why I call them pantry cookies. For me, I'm gonna be using some coconut, some chocolate chips, and some chopped walnuts. If you don't have these ingredients on hand, don't stress. You could switch out walnuts for pecans, you could add some dried fruit, you can just totally omit the coconut, whatever works for you. For the flour, we're gonna be using oats. These are whole rolled oats. I'm gonna be putting these in the blender to grind it up into an oat flour. We have two sources of sweetness here. We've got brown sugar and maple syrup. They just work really well together. If you don't have maple syrup, you can swap in honey or you could bump up the brown sugar. Lastly, just some other basic pantry items, baking soda, salt, butter, and that's it. All right, time to make the dough. I know flour can be super hard to come by these days, so I really wanted to create a delicious recipe so that it didn't stop you from baking. Making oat flour is super easy. I'm just gonna pop these rolled oats into my blender and blend. My blender is very loud. All right, and just like that, we've got oat flour. So if you take a look, it's actually very similar to the consistency of regular flour. It's a little bit grittier, of course, because we're using oats and grinding ourselves. So now that our oat flour is done, we're gonna get moving on the rest of our dry ingredients. So to the oat flour, I'm gonna be adding a teaspoon of salt. I'm also gonna add a half teaspoon of baking soda. And finally, a half a cup of full rolled oats. I like using full rolled oats on top of the oat flour because it just gives that added texture to the final cookie. You wanna make sure it's fully mixed. And we're gonna set our dry ingredients aside for now. All right, moving on to probably my favorite part about this cookie, the brown butter. It gives this awesome, luxurious, rich nuttiness to your cookie, but don't let that intimidate you. It's super easy to make. Melt your butter down and get those brown bits and thank me later. It's also helpful to use a lighter pan so that you can check the color of the butter as it cooks, but it's not necessary. I don't have a lighter pan, so this is what I'm using. Or maybe I will. You're gonna wanna pay close attention to your butter because there's only a few seconds between brown butter and burnt butter. And we don't want burnt butter in this recipe. All right, 6 tablespoons of butter going in. You wanna keep a close watch of your butter. Once it's melted, you're gonna wanna keep stirring. We just wanna make sure it doesn't burn. Again, making brown butter takes a few extra minutes here, but it's worth it, I promise. All right, so now my butter has completely melted down and I'm gonna keep stirring. You'll notice that your butter starts to foam up. That's totally normal. And then eventually you'll notice some brown bits forming at the bottom. Keep it stirring, and once it's brown, we'll take it off the heat. Our butter is brown. It looks and smells super delicious. All right, and to our brown butter, I'm gonna add 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/4 of a cup of maple syrup. Again, a super awesome flavor from the maple syrup here. 1 egg. And now whisk. You're gonna wanna mix this up pretty well. I always try to do the heavy mixing while everything is separated. And then once we add in the dry ingredients, you're gonna wanna switch to more of like a fold. All right, the wet is mixed. Now I'm gonna start adding our dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. And again, I'm switching to a spatula to fold it all together. The dough is gonna look fairly wet when it comes together. Don't worry, as the dough sits, the oats will continue to absorb some of that moisture. Ooh, it smells so good. All right, and finally, I'm gonna add in the yummy stuff. So again, I'm using shredded unsweetened coconut, chopped walnuts, and chocolate chips. You can swap in whatever you have on hand. Don't stress. I'm adding a half a cup of each of these toppings just because this makes for a really nice, chunky, textured cookie. Give it a final mix. All right. So now I'm gonna let this dough hang out on the counter at room temperature for about 10 to 15 minutes. This will help the dough absorb some of that moisture so that it comes together more easily. You could also pop it in the fridge, but that will result in like a fluffier cookie, and I like my cookies a little bit flatter and chewier. I also should mention that I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. All right, see you soon. Our dough has been hanging out for about 15 minutes. If you give it a little mix, you'll notice that it's a lot thicker than it was originally, so that's a really important step. So I just use about a spoonful of dough, then I transfer it into my hand and roll it into a ball, and then just pop it on the sheet. The cookies don't spread out too much, so you don't have to worry about them being too close, but I still leave like an inch apart. The dough is a little bit sticky, so your hands will probably get a little messy, but it just adds to the fun. This is definitely an activity you can do with kids, working for the cookies. I'm sure they won't mind. Last one for this tray. Beautiful. Now, I'm not saying I've tried this dough because there is egg in there, but it's really good. I'm gonna use a spoon to flatten these cookies out. This will help you get the perfect cookie shape. If your spoon sticks too much to the dough, you can oil the back of it so that it comes off nice and easy. And I just try to go around with my finger and kind of reshape them just to make sure they're nice and round. Finally, and this is totally optional, I'm gonna add a little bit of flaky salt on the top of each one. I really like flaky salt on cookies, it just adds a little like something something. All right, and now we bake. So I'm gonna bake these at 350 degrees for about 7 minutes. They cook pretty quickly, which is a plus. Just check them to make sure they don't burn. All right, our timer just went off. I'm gonna check on the cookies. Ooh, those are looking so good. So these cookies are a little bit fragile because we're using oat flour. So I'm gonna let them cool a bit on the pan itself, because if I try to transfer them now, they'll probably break. Then I'll transfer them to a plate to cool even more. And then we've got our cookies. And there you have it, our brown butter pantry cookies are done. They smell so good, I cannot wait to try it. These are so good. They've got the perfect balance of salty to sweet. They've got so much texture from all the stuff we put in there. The caramelized sweetness from the brown sugar and the maple syrup goes so well with that brown butter and the walnuts. Definitely a cookie that will satisfy the sweet tooth, my sweet tooth specifically. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed this video. If you make these cookies, please tag me, I'd love to see it. And remember, stay home, wash your hands, and eat a cookie.
Oh, yes!